This 4-year-old homeless girl unexpectedly finds 3 abandoned babies, but she gets arrested for allegedly kidnapping the children. What happens when the father of these babies shows up will leave you in shock. Comment what you think will happen and subscribe to my channel to support my work. The biting cold of the early morning made Isabella shiver as she huddled against the brick wall of the downtown market. At 4 years old, the little girl already knew every corner and hiding spot of Millbrook, a small town in rural Kentucky where the cobblestone streets still held old stories. Her brown hair was tangled and dirty, and the faded blue dress she'd been wearing for days no longer offered protection against the icy January wind. Isabella had woken up early, as she always did, searching for leftover food in the dumpsters behind the commercial buildings. The downtown farmers' market was one of her favorite spots, as vendors sometimes left bruised fruit or day-old bread behind. She walked barefoot across the uneven stones, her small feet already calloused from life on the streets, when a strange sound made her stop. It was a low cry, almost a whimper, coming from behind the market. Isabella knew the sound of suffering well. She had heard children crying at St. Michael's Children's Home, where she had escaped from 3 months ago when she couldn't bear to see the other children being mistreated by the cruel director anymore. But this cry was different, higher-pitched, more desperate. Following the sound, she walked around the historic brick building of the market until she found a small alley between 2 buildings. There, next to some old wooden crates, was a wicker basket covered with a white cloth. The crying was coming from inside it. With her heart racing, Isabella approached slowly. Her small hands trembled, not from cold, but from a mixture of curiosity and fear. When she carefully pulled away the cloth covering the basket, her eyes widened with surprise and compassion. 3 tiny babies were inside, pressed against each other, crying weakly. They were so small they looked like dolls, with reddish skin and wrinkles that only newborns have. They were wrapped in simple diapers and a thin blanket that barely kept them warm. "Little babies," whispered Isabella, her voice choked with emotion. She had never seen babies so small up close. At the children's home, the youngest kids were at least a year old. These seemed to have just been born. Without hesitating, Isabella picked up the basket very carefully. It was heavy for her thin arms, but she didn't think twice. The babies needed help, and she knew what it was like to be alone and cold. She couldn't leave them there. "Don't cry, my little brothers," she said softly, using the endearing term that came naturally to her mind. "I'm going to take care of you." Looking for a more protected spot, Isabella found a gap between 2 closed shops where there were some cardboard boxes that other homeless people used. She placed the basket on the ground and began gathering all the rags and newspapers she could find, wrapping the babies with extra care. The sun was beginning to rise when Isabella realized the babies were hungry. Their cries became more intense, and she noticed how they moved their little mouths, as if searching for milk. She had seen this in abandoned kittens before. With determination that would impress any adult, Isabella began walking through the downtown market, which was gradually awakening for another day. The first vendors arrived to open their fruit and vegetable stands. "Sir, please," she said to Sebastian, a 60-year-old man who sold cheese and fresh milk. "My babies are hungry. Do you have a little bit of milk?" Sebastian looked up from the boxes he was unloading and saw that skinny little girl holding an improvised baby bottle made from a small soda bottle with a piece of cloth on the tip. She had gotten the bottle from another vendor and tried to create a nipple with the materials she had. "What babies, little girl?" he asked, intrigued. "Over there," pointed Isabella toward the gap where she had left the basket. "I found them abandoned. They're crying from hunger." Sebastian followed the girl to the spot, and his heart tightened when he saw the 3 babies in the basket. They were really newborns, couldn't be more than a few days old. How had they ended up there? And why was this street child taking care of them as if they were her brothers? "My God," he murmured, taking off his cap. Where did these children come from? I don't know, replied Isabella honestly, kneeling beside the basket and gently stroking one of the baby's foreheads. But they need me. They need warm milk and love. Sebastian watched the girl care for the babies with a tenderness he didn't expect to find in someone so young. She spoke to them in a low voice, tried to clean their little faces with a damp cloth she had borrowed from another vendor, and constantly checked if they were warm. Throughout the morning, Isabella remained there, caring for the 3 babies like a little mother. Other vendors approached, curious and concerned. Some offered help, bringing warm milk and even some clean diapers they managed to get from their homes. But it was Mrs. Marlene, owner of a children's clothing store, who finally made the decision to call the authorities. As touched as she was by Isabella's dedication, she knew the situation was too serious to be solved, just with the vendor's goodwill. "Sweetheart," she said gently to Isabella, "we need to call people who can really help. These babies need a doctor, special care." "But I'm taking good care of them," protested Isabella, protectively hugging the basket. "They're not crying anymore. They're quiet." "You're taking very good care of them," Mrs. Marlene reassured her. "But they need more things that only adults can provide." When the police arrived 2 hours later, they found a scene that left them perplexed. There was a 4-year-old girl, dirty and malnourished, caring for 3 newborns with the dedication of an experienced mother. She had managed to feed them, keep them warm, and had even tried to change diapers with the vendor's help. Sergeant Robert Miller, a 50-year-old man accustomed to dealing with difficult situations, was speechless for a moment. Unfortunately, his first impression wasn't admiration for the girl's care, but suspicion. "Little girl, where did these babies come from?" he asked, using a harsher tone than he should have with a child. "I found them over there," replied Isabella, pointing to the place where she had discovered the basket. "They were crying, cold. Nobody was taking care of them, and you just took them." "They were alone," repeated Isabella, beginning to cry. She could tell the officer was angry with her, but didn't understand why. "I couldn't let them die from the cold." The misunderstanding was just beginning, and Isabella had no idea that her attempt to save 3 abandoned babies would forever change the course of her own life. The Millbrook Police Department had never received such a puzzling case. Isabella sat in a chair too high for her, swinging her little legs in the air while watching with frightened eyes as the officers talked in low voices across the room. The 3 babies had been taken to Millbrook General Hospital for medical examinations, and she kept asking when she could see them again. "I want my little brothers back," she repeated for the 5th time to Detective John Mitchell, a 30-year-old man who clearly didn't know how to deal with children. "They're going to miss me. I need to give them their bottles." The detective sighed, flipping through the papers on his desk. The case was getting stranger by the hour. The babies were triplets, all male, apparently healthy despite being found abandoned. But what intrigued him most was the girl's story, which didn't change a single detail, even after 3 hours of questioning. "Isabella," he said, trying to be gentle, "are you sure you found the babies in the basket? You didn't take them from somewhere else?" "I already told you 1,000 times," she replied, starting to get irritated. "They were in the basket, crying. I didn't take them from anyone. I saved them." At that moment, the door to the police station opened, and Sandra Williams entered, the social worker responsible for minors' cases in the region. At 52 years old, Sandra had a rigid posture and a penetrating gaze that intimidated even adults. Her graying hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her navy blue suit gave an even more serious air to her figure. She'd been called to evaluate Isabella's situation and define the next steps in the case. During her 20 years of career, she had dealt with hundreds of at-risk children, but never with a situation as unusual as this one. "Good afternoon," said Sandra to the detective before turning her attention to Isabella. "And you must be the girl who found the babies." "Found and took care of them," corrected Isabella, raising her chin with determination. "They were hungry and cold. I gave them milk and warm blankets." Sandra observed the child carefully. Isabella was clearly malnourished, with dirty clothes and evident signs that she'd been living on the streets for some time. But there was something in her eyes, an early maturity mixed with genuine concern for the babies, that made her hesitate before forming any judgment. "Tell me exactly what happened this morning," asked Sandra, sitting in a nearby chair to be at the girl's height. Isabella repeated her story once more, this time with even more details. She talked about how she heard the crying, how she found the basket, how she asked the vendors for help. Sandra noticed that the version didn't change at any point, something rare in children who were lying. "And where did you sleep last night?" asked Sandra. "At the market, behind the wooden crates. I always sleep there when it's not raining." "How long have you been living on the street?" Isabella's eyes filled with tears. "Since I ran away from St. Michael's Children's Home. The director there was mean. She hit the little children and didn't give proper food. I saw her hurt a little baby once, so I ran away." Sandra frowned. She knew St. Michael's Children's Home, located about 60 miles away. There had been rumors about administrative problems there, but she had never been able to officially prove anything. "When did you run away from there?" "A long time ago, when the cold started," replied Isabella, referring to the beginning of winter. At that moment, the detective in charge of the case, Sheriff David Thompson, entered the room with a worried expression. He was a 55-year-old man, experienced and respected in town, but who seemed perplexed by the situation. "Sandra, we need to talk," he said, indicating they should step out of the room for a moment. Outside, Sheriff Thompson lowered his voice. "The hospital confirmed that the babies are newborns, probably less than a week old. They're healthy, but need special care. The problem is, we can't find any record of them." "What do you mean, no record?" "They don't appear in any birth certificate. There's no record of admission to maternity wards in the region. Nothing. It's as if these babies don't officially exist." Sandra felt a chill in her stomach. In her years of experience, she had learned that when babies appeared without records, there was usually something very wrong behind the situation. And the girl? Her story is consistent. All the market vendors confirm that she showed up early in the morning with the babies, asking for help to feed them. Sebastian, the dairy vendor, said he'd never seen a child so dedicated to caring for babies. Sandra returned to the room where Isabella waited, now lying down in the chair, clearly exhausted. The girl had spent the entire morning caring for 3 babies and then being interrogated for hours at the police station. "Isabella, are you hungry?" asked Sandra, her voice a little softer. "A little, but I want to know about my babies first. How are they?" "They're fine, at the hospital, being cared for by doctors and nurses." "Can I go see them?" Sandra hesitated. The situation was complicated. On one hand, the girl had clearly saved the lives of the 3 babies. On the other, she herself was at risk, living on the streets without family or legal guardian. "Isabella, you're going to need to stay in a safe place for now, while we investigate what happened with the babies." "What place?" "A temporary shelter, where other children stay when they need help." Isabella's eyes filled with panic. The word shelter brought back all the bad memories from St. Michael's Children's Home. "I don't want to go to a shelter. I want to stay with my babies." "They need me. The babies will be well cared for." "No!" screamed Isabella, jumping up from the chair. "You don't understand. They're going to be scared without me. I promised I would take care of them." Tears streamed down the dirty face of the girl as she tried to run toward the door. Sandra held her gently, but Isabella struggled like a frightened bird. "Please," she sobbed, "let me stay with them. I know how to take care of them. I gave them bottles, changed diapers, sang lullabies. They like me." Sandra felt something move in her chest. For years, she had gotten used to being objective and pragmatic in her work, maintaining emotional distance from cases. But there was something about the genuine pain of that girl that touched her deeply. "Isabella, listen," she said, kneeling to be at the child's height. I promise you'll be able to visit the babies. But first, you need care too. You need to take a bath, eat a hot meal, sleep in a real bed. And then I can see my little brothers. And then we'll see what's possible to do." It wasn't a complete promise, but it was enough to temporarily calm Isabella. While Sandra arranged for the girls' transfer to the municipal temporary shelter, a call came to the police station that would completely change the course of the investigation. On the other end of the line, a trembling female voice identified herself as Carol Santos, a nurse at St. John's Hospital in the neighboring town of Riverside. "I need to talk about the babies that appeared today in Millbrook," she said, clearly nervous. "I know where they came from." Carol Santos's call put the entire police station on high alert. The 45-year-old nurse spoke in whispers, clearly terrified, asking to meet with the authorities in a private location. They scheduled the meeting for that same night at a quiet coffee shop in downtown Riverside, the town neighboring Millbrook. Meanwhile, Isabella was being taken to Hope Municipal Shelter, an old house adapted to receive at-risk children. The place wasn't bad, but for a girl who had spent months living freely on the streets, the walls seemed like a prison. "I don't want to stay here," she told Sandra, while looking at the simple room with 2 single beds and a small dresser. "I want to go back to the market. The vendors know me, they take care of me." "Isabella, you're a child. You need proper care, regular meals, a safe place to sleep." "I managed fine on my own," muttered the girl, sitting on the edge of the bed with her arms crossed. Sandra observed this 4-year-old child, who spoke as if she had much more life experience. There was something deeply touching about how Isabella had taken responsibility for the babies, but also something disturbing about the early maturity that life on the streets had forced her to develop. "Ms. Connie is going to take good care of you," said Sandra, referring to the shelter coordinator. "She's very kind to the children." But Isabella wasn't listening. Her thoughts were completely focused on the 3 babies at the hospital. How were they feeling without her? Who was giving them their bottles? Was anyone singing the lullabies she had made up during the day? That night, while Isabella cried quietly in her new bed, Sheriff David Thompson and Sandra headed to Riverside to meet Carol Santos. The chosen coffee shop was on a quiet side street, perfect for a confidential conversation. Carol arrived promptly at 8 o'clock, but was visibly nervous. She was a woman of medium height, brown hair pulled back in a ponytail, and hands that trembled slightly as she held her coffee cup. "Thank you for coming," she said, constantly looking around as if expecting to be watched. "I didn't know what to do. When I heard they found the triplets in Millbrook, I knew I had to speak up." "Triplets?" repeated Sheriff Thompson, leaning forward. "How do you know they're triplets?" "Because I was present when they were born, at St. John's Hospital 5 days ago." Sandra felt her heart race. Finally, they were getting the answers they needed. "Tell us everything," she asked. Carol took a deep breath before beginning. "The mother's name is Berenice Mason. She was admitted to the maternity ward in a very complicated situation. The delivery was difficult. She lost a lot of blood. She had to stay in the ICU. And the father, Ottavio Mason, he owns several car dealerships in the region. A wealthy man, very desperate about his wife's condition." Sheriff Thompson quickly wrote down all the information. "Continue." "The babies were born premature but healthy. They stayed in the nursery under observation. Ottavio barely left his wife's side as she remained in critical condition." "And what happened to the babies?" Carol lowered her voice even more. "On the 2nd night after birth, I was working my shift in the nursery when I saw strange movement. The hospital director, Dorothy Peterson, came in accompanied by 2 people I had never seen." "What time was it?" "Around 3 in the morning. I found it strange because the director never appeared in the nursery at that hour. She went directly to where the triplets were." Sandra frowned. "And did you do anything?" "I tried to get closer to hear the conversation, but they spoke very quietly. I could only understand a few words. Documents, wealthy family, but payment. Do you think they were planning to sell the babies? Carol nodded with tears in her eyes. I'm sure of it. Dorothy has a questionable history. There have been rumors at the hospital for years, but no one has ever been able to prove anything. And what happened next? The following night, I received a message to go to the director's office. When I got there, she was with a man I didn't know. Dorothy told me I'd been chosen for a special mission. Sheriff Thompson stopped writing and looked directly at Carol. What kind of mission? She wanted me to transport the babies to a family in another state. She said it was all legal, that the paperwork was in order, but that it needed to be done discreetly because of the sensitivity of the situation. And you agreed? Carol began to cry. At first, yes. They offered me a lot of money, more than I would earn in 2 years. My mother is sick, needs surgery. I thought it was just a special adoption. But you changed your mind. When it came time to take the babies, something inside me wouldn't let me. They were so small, so helpless, and I thought about their father, who was suffering so much with his wife's condition. How would he feel when he discovered his children had disappeared? Sandra held Carol's hand. What did you do? I took the babies as agreed, but instead of taking them to the buying family, I decided to abandon them in a place where I knew they would be found quickly and cared for. The downtown market in Millbrook. Exactly. I thought the vendors would find them early and call for help. But you didn't count on Isabella. Who's Isabella? The 4-year-old girl who found the babies. She took care of them all morning before anyone called the authorities. Carol covered her face with her hands. A 4-year-old child took care of 3 newborns. My God, what have I done? You saved their lives, said Sheriff Thompson firmly. If you had handed them over to that network, we probably would never see them again. But now, I'm in danger. Dorothy and her partners found out it was me. They're threatening me. What kind of threats? They say they're going to make up that I stole the babies, that they're going to incriminate me. I'm afraid to go home, afraid to go to work. Sandra and Sheriff Thompson exchanged meaningful looks. The case was proving to be much more complex and dangerous than they had imagined. Carol, you need to help us expose this scheme, said Sandra. How many other children might have been sold? I don't know for sure, but I suspect many. Dorothy has always had privileged access to mothers in vulnerable situations, pregnant women without families, complicated cases. And the triplets' father, Ottavio. Does he know his children disappeared? I don't know. When I left the hospital, Berenice was still in the ICU, unconscious. Ottavio spent all his time by her side. It's possible they haven't even noticed yet. Sheriff Thompson closed his notebook. Carol, you'll need to testify formally and help us gather evidence against Dorothy and her network. What if they try to hurt me? We'll provide protection. But without your help, other children will continue to be sold. That same night, while the authorities planned how to approach the case 30 miles away, Ottavio Mason slept in an uncomfortable chair next to the ICU bed where his wife Berenice fought for her life. He didn't know that his 3 children had disappeared from the nursery 3 days ago. He didn't know that a 4-year-old street girl had become their temporary guardian, and he definitely didn't know that his life was about to become a roller coaster of despair and revelations that would test all the limits of his emotional endurance. At the municipal shelter, Isabella had finally fallen asleep, but even in her dreams, she continued caring for 3 little babies who cried for protection and love. St. John's Hospital in Riverside was plunged in the silence of dawn when Ottavio Mason was awakened by a nurse gently touching his shoulder. He had fallen asleep in the chair beside the ICU bed, where Berenice had been hospitalized for 5 days since the traumatic delivery of the triplets. "Mr. Ottavio," said the nurse with a soft voice, "we need you in the nursery." Ottavio got up quickly, his heart racing. At 38 years old, he was a man accustomed to solving complex problems in his businesses, but the situation with his wife had left him completely vulnerable. Berenice still hadn't woken up since the emergency surgery, and he divided his time between watching her condition and going to the nursery to see his 3 sons. "Did something happen to the boys?" he asked, following the nurse through the dimly lit corridor. "Dr. Henry wants to speak with you," she replied, avoiding looking directly into his eyes. When they arrived at the nursery, Ottavio immediately noticed something was very wrong. Dr. Henry Carter, the pediatrician responsible for the baby's care, had a grave expression, accompanied by the hospital director, Dorothy Peterson. "Ottavio," said Dorothy with fake concern in her voice, "please sit down. We have something difficult to tell you." "Where are my sons?" asked Ottavio directly, looking at the empty cribs where his babies should have been. "There was an incident," Dorothy began carefully. "During the night, we discovered that the babies weren't in the nursery." Ottavio's world stopped. "What do you mean they weren't there? Where are they?" "We believe someone took them," said Dr. Henry, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "We've already contacted the authorities. They're investigating." Ottavio stood up abruptly, the chair falling backward from the impact. "Someone stole my children. How is this possible? Where was security?" "I understand your pain," said Dorothy, "but you need to calm down. We're doing everything we can." "Everything you can?" exploded Ottavio. "My wife is between life and death in the ICU, and you let my children be kidnapped inside the hospital itself." Tears began streaming down the businessman's face. In 5 days, his life had turned into a nightmare. First, the complicated delivery, Berenice in a coma, and now the triplets had disappeared. "When exactly did this happen?" he asked, trying to control his emotion to think rationally. "We discovered it recently. The night shift nurse, Carol Santos, also disappeared. We believe she might be involved." Ottavio felt his legs go weak. Carol was the nurse who showed the most affection for his babies, always talking about how beautiful and well cared for they were. How could she have taken them? "I want to speak with the police now," he said with a firm voice. "I want all the details. I want to know exactly what happened, and I want my children back." While Ottavio dealt with the devastating discovery 30 miles away, Isabella was living her first full day at the municipal shelter. She had woken up early, as always, but instead of looking for food on the streets, she found a prepared breakfast on the common table, bread with butter, warm milk, and a piece of fruit. "Good morning, Isabella," said Ms. Connie, a 60-year-old woman with a maternal manner who coordinated the shelter. "Did you sleep well?" "No," replied Isabella honestly. "I kept thinking about my babies. How are they? Did anyone go see them?" Ms. Connie sighed. Sandra had explained the girl's situation, and she knew how difficult it would be to deal with the separation. "The babies are being very well cared for at the hospital," she said gently. "There are doctors and nurses watching them all the time, but they don't know the doctors. They know me. I know how each one likes to drink their bottle. I know the middle boy likes to be rocked slowly. I know the smallest one only stops crying when someone sings quietly." The precision of the details mentioned by Isabella impressed Ms. Connie. It was evident that the girl had carefully observed each baby during the hours she spent with them. "How do you know all this about them?" "Because I took care of them all morning," replied Isabella, as if it were obvious. "When you take care of babies, you have to pay attention to what they like and what they don't like." "And where did you learn to take care of babies?" Isabella lowered her eyes, playing with the bread on her plate. "At St. Michael's Children's Home there were little babies. I helped take care of them, even though I wasn't supposed to. I liked making them stop crying." "Why did you run away from there?" "The director was mean. She hit the babies when they cried too much. Once I saw her squeeze a very small baby's arm until it turned purple. I couldn't let that happen." Ms. Connie felt a tightness in her chest. She knew rumors about problems at St. Michael's Children's Home, but had never heard such specific details from someone who lived there. "And do you think you knew how to take care of the babies you found?" "I know I did," said Isabella with conviction. "They stopped crying when I gave them milk. They got warm when I put the blankets on them, and when I sang to them, they got really calm. During the day, Isabella refused to participate in the shelter's activities. She didn't want to play with the other children, didn't want to draw or watch television. She sat in a chair by the window, looking at the street as if expecting someone to appear with news about the babies. "When can I go see my babies?" she asked every time an adult passed by. In the afternoon, Sandra arrived at the shelter with a worried expression. Carol's revelations had made the case much more complex, and she needed to talk to Isabella again. "Hi, Isabella," she said, sitting next to the girl. "How are you feeling?" "Bad. I want to see my babies." "I understand. But first I need to ask you some questions about the morning you found them. I already told everyone everything." "I know, but new information has come up. Are you absolutely sure you found the babies abandoned in the basket?" Isabella looked at Sandra with irritation. "Why does everyone keep asking this? I didn't lie. They were alone, crying, cold." "I'm not saying you lied. I just need to be sure of all the details." "Ms. Sandra," said Isabella, her voice becoming more serious, "I know I'm a child, but I'm not stupid. I know the difference between finding something and taking something from someone. I found my babies." Sandra observed the determined expression on the girl's face. There was something about the way Isabella referred to the triplets as "my babies" that was both touching and concerning. "Isabella, do you understand that the babies have real parents? People who are looking for them?" "Then why were they thrown in a basket?" retorted Isabella. "If the parents took good care of them, they wouldn't have been abandoned." It was simple but incontestable logic. Sandra realized it would be very difficult to explain to a 4-year-old child the complexity of the situation, that the babies had been stolen from their parents, not abandoned by them. "The parents didn't know they were in the basket," she said carefully. "Bad people took the babies from their parents without them knowing." Isabella's eyes widened. "Bad people stole my babies from their parents." "That's right. And now the parents must be very sad, looking for their children?" "Exactly." Isabella remained silent for a long time, processing this information. Finally, she looked at Sandra with an expression too mature for her age. "So I saved my babies from the bad people?" "Yes, in a way you saved them. And now they're going to go back to their real parents?" "Yes. But can I go with them to help take care of them? I know how they like things." The question broke Sandra's heart. Isabella had developed a genuine bond with the babies, but the reality was that she would have to be separated from them. "We'll see what's possible," she said, using the same evasive response as always. That night, while Isabella cried quietly in her bed at the shelter, Ottavio Mason walked the streets of Riverside with printed photos of his children, desperate for any clue. He had hired private detectives, offered a reward, and even considered paying ransom if someone made contact. What he didn't know was that his children were being very well cared for at Millbrook General Hospital, and that a 4-year-old girl had spent the entire day crying over their separation, feeling a pain that perfectly mirrored his own anguish. A week had passed since Isabella arrived at the shelter, and her condition was getting worse each day. The girl who had once managed to survive on her own on the streets, showing impressive resilience for her age, now refused to eat properly and spent nights awake crying for the babies. "She's not adapting," said Ms. Connie to Sandra during a private conversation in the shelter's hallway. "She barely touches her food, doesn't interact with the other children, and yesterday I found her trying to escape through the bathroom window." Sandra observed Isabella through the partially open door. The girl was sitting on the floor of her room, drawing with crayons on pieces of paper. Even from a distance, it was possible to see that all the drawings were of babies. 3 small figures, always together, surrounded by colorful hearts. "She draws the triplets all the time," continued Miss Connie, "and she talks to herself as if she were talking to them. Yesterday I heard her singing a lullaby to the paper. That's concerning. I'll talk to the child psychologist." "Sandra, can I ask you something? Wouldn't it be possible to arrange a visit? Letting her see that the babies are okay might help with accepting the separation. Sandra sighed. The situation was getting more complicated. The investigations into the baby trafficking network had progressed, but they still didn't have enough evidence to arrest Dorothy. Meanwhile, Ottavio Mason was becoming increasingly desperate, and now there was also Isabella suffering from separation from the babies she considered hers. "I'll see what I can do," she promised. That same day in Riverside, Ottavio was meeting with the private detectives he had hired. The office was small and poorly lit, but the two men working on the case had good reputations in the region. "Mr. Ottavio," said Mario Augustus, a 50-year-old investigator with experience in kidnapping cases, "we've got important information." "Did you find my children?" asked Ottavio, standing up quickly. "Not yet, but we discovered where they were taken. There are records that 3 newborn babies were found in Millbrook on the same day your children disappeared." Ottavio's heart raced. "Are you sure it's them?" "The description matches perfectly. Triplets, male, compatible age. They're at Millbrook General Hospital." "Then let's go get them now," exclaimed Ottavio, grabbing his car keys. "Hold on, Mr. Ottavio," said the other detective, Robert Silver. "The situation is more complicated. The babies were found by a 4-year-old street girl. The authorities are investigating how they ended up there." "A 4-year-old child found my children?" "Exactly. And from what we discovered, she took care of them for hours before someone called the police. She's staying at a municipal shelter and, from what we heard, developed a very strong bond with the babies." Ottavio sat down again, processing this information. His children had been saved by a street child. A girl the same age they would be when they grew up. "I need to meet this girl," he said, surprised by his own statement. "I need to thank her." "Mr. Ottavio, the important thing now is to get your children back. The legal procedures are already being arranged." "No," said Ottavio firmly. "I want to meet the girl who saved my children. What's her name?" "Isabella. We don't know her last name. She ran away from a children's home a few months ago and was living on the streets." The next day, Sandra received an unexpected call. On the other end of the line, a man identified himself as Ottavio Mason and asked to meet with her urgently. "Mr. Ottavio, I understand your desperation," said Sandra when they met at the municipal hospital where the triplets were staying. "But I can't simply hand over the babies. I need to follow legal procedures." "I understand that. I'm not here to demand anything. I just want to see my children and meet the girl who saved them." Sandra studied the man in front of her. Ottavio Mason was visibly worn down, with deep dark circles under his eyes and wrinkled clothes. It was evident that the last few days had been hell for him. "How is your wife?" she asked. "Berenice came out of the coma yesterday," said Ottavio, and for the first time a weak smile appeared on his face. "The doctors say she'll recover completely." "Does she know about the babies?" The smile disappeared. "I haven't been able to tell her yet. How am I going to explain that our children disappeared while she was fighting for her life in the ICU?" Sandra led Ottavio to the hospital nursery, where the 3 babies were under special care. When he saw them for the first time in a week, Ottavio began to cry. "It's them," he whispered, carefully approaching the cribs. "My boys." "How are they?" "Perfectly healthy," said the nurse in charge. "The girl who found them did an incredible job. They arrived here well-fed and with no signs of neglect. A 4-year-old child managed to take care of 3 newborns." "She did indeed. And from what the market vendors told us, she showed impressive maternal instinct. She knew exactly how to feed them, how to keep them warm." Ottavio gently touched one of the baby's little hands. "Where is she now?" "At the municipal shelter," replied Sandra, "and she's not well. She developed a very strong attachment to the babies and is suffering a lot from the separation." "Can I meet her?" Sandra hesitated. "Mr. Ottavio, Isabella's situation is complicated. She really believes the babies are her responsibility. It could be difficult for everyone involved. Please, I need to look into the eyes of the person who saved my children. An hour later, Sandra took Ottavio to the municipal shelter. Isabella was in her usual spot, sitting by the window with her drawings scattered around her. "Isabella," Sandra called softly, "there's someone here who wants to meet you." The girl looked up disinterestedly, but when she saw Ottavio, something in her expression changed. Maybe it was the way he looked at her, with a mixture of gratitude and admiration, or maybe it was the childish instinct that made her realize this man was suffering as much as she was. "Are you my baby's daddy?" she asked directly. Ottavio knelt in front of her, getting to the girl's eye level. "I am, and you're Isabella, the brave girl who saved them. How are they? Is someone singing to them?" The middle boy likes to be rocked slowly. The precision of the details moved Ottavio deeply. "They're fine, very well cared for." "I took care of them first," said Isabella, not as a claim, but as a statement of fact. "I found them crying in the basket. They were hungry and cold. And you warmed them up and gave them food." "Of course. Little babies can't be left without care." Ottavio felt an overwhelming emotion. This 4-year-old girl had done for his children what any father or mother would do. She had protected and cared for them when they needed it most. "Isabella," he said with a choked voice, "how can I thank you for saving my children?" "By letting me see them," she replied immediately. "I just want to know if they're okay." Ottavio looked at Sandra, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "How about we go visit them together?" he proposed. Isabella's eyes lit up for the first time in a week. "Can I really?" "You can." When they arrived at the hospital, Isabella ran toward the cribs with a joy that moved everyone present. She observed each baby attentively, like a mother checking on her children's well-being. "They grew," she told Ottavio, "and they're chubbier. Do you think they're okay?" "They are," she replied after careful analysis. "But they missed me. Look how the smallest one is looking at me." Ottavio observed the interaction between Isabella and his children, and something deep moved within him. This girl had saved what he held most precious in the world, and now she herself needed saving. "Isabella," he said impulsively, "would you like to continue helping take care of them?" Ottavio's question left everyone in the nursery silent. Sandra looked at him with surprise, while Isabella widened her eyes with a hope she hadn't felt for days. "What do you mean?" she asked cautiously, as if afraid it was just a dream. Ottavio was also surprised by his own words, but something in that moment told him it was the right thing to do. "I mean, you know my children better than anyone. Maybe you could help us take care of them." "Mister." "Ottavio," Sandra interrupted diplomatically, "can we talk privately for a moment?" Outside the nursery, Sandra was direct. "Do you understand the complexity of what you're suggesting? Isabella is a minor in a vulnerable situation with no known family who ran away from a children's home. You can't simply take her home." "I didn't say I wanted to take her home," replied Ottavio. "But this girl saved my children, and she's clearly suffering away from them. There must be some legal way to allow her to maintain contact." Sandra sighed. The situation was becoming increasingly complicated. "Besides, you still need to tell your wife about the baby's disappearance. How will she react to knowing that a street child took care of her children?" The observation hit Ottavio like a punch. Berenice still didn't know anything. How would he explain that their children were kidnapped from the hospital and found by an abandoned girl? "I'll tell Berenice everything today," he said. "She has the right to know." That afternoon, Ottavio returned to St. John's Hospital in Riverside for one of the most difficult conversations of his life. Berenice had woken from the coma 2 days ago and was recovering well physically but still felt weak and confused. "Honey," she said when she saw him enter the room, "where are our babies? Why didn't you bring them for me to see?" Ottavio sat on the edge of the bed, holding his wife's hands. "Berenice, I need to tell you something very difficult." Her expression changed immediately. "What happened? Is one of the babies sick?" No, they're healthy, but they were taken from the nursery the night you had surgery. Taken? What do you mean, taken? Someone took them from the hospital. They were kidnapped. Berenice tried to sit up in bed but was still too weak. Kidnapped? My children were kidnapped? Where are they now? We already found them. They're safe at Millbrook General Hospital. And who took them? Why did they do this? Ottavio took a deep breath. We are still investigating, but it seems like it was a baby-selling scheme. Someone here at the hospital was involved. Tears began streaming down Berenice's face. And how were they found? By a 4-year-old girl who lives on the streets. She found them abandoned in a basket and took care of them until someone called the police. A street child? My babies were with a street child. Berenice, she saved them. If it weren't for her, we might never have seen our children again. Berenice covered her face with her hands, sobbing. While I was here sleeping, my babies were lost on the street, being cared for by an abandoned child. She took very good care of them. The babies were healthy when they were found. I want to see them now, said Berenice, trying to get out of bed. You can't leave the hospital yet. The doctors said, I don't care what the doctors said. I want my children. The argument was interrupted by the arrival of Dr. Henry, who had heard the shouting from the corridor. Mrs. Berenice, you need to calm down, he said. Your body is still recovering from surgery. Doctor, when can I leave here? I need to get my children. A few more days, if all goes well, but it's important that you don't get agitated. When the doctor left, Berenice grabbed Ottavio's arm tightly. I want to meet this girl, the girl who took care of our children. Are you sure? Absolutely. If she saved our babies, I need to thank her personally. The next day, against medical recommendations but with nursing supervision, Berenice was taken by ambulance to Millbrook. It was the first time she had left the hospital since giving birth, and she was visibly nervous. First, they went to the municipal hospital to see the triplets. When Berenice saw them, she broke down completely. My babies, she cried, touching each one with extreme care. Mommy is here now. Mommy will never leave you alone again. The babies seemed to recognize their mother's voice, moving restlessly in their cribs. Berenice observed them attentively, checking every detail to make sure they were okay. They really are healthy, she told Ottavio, relieved. This girl, she really took good care of them. Do you want to meet her? Berenice hesitated for a moment. Yes, I need to look into the eyes of the person who protected my children when I couldn't. At the municipal shelter, Isabella was more animated since the previous day's visit. She had told all the other children about her babies and how she had taken care of them. Isabella, said Sandra, there are more people here to meet you. When she saw Berenice entering supported in a wheelchair, Isabella immediately knew who she was. You're the baby's mommy, she said, approaching timidly. Berenice studied that small, thin girl with simple shelter clothes and still unruly hair. It was hard to believe that someone so young had taken responsibility for 3 newborns. I am, replied Berenice with a soft voice. And you're Isabella, who took care of my children. I did. They were very cold and hungry when I found them. But now they're strong. How did you know how to take care of such small babies? At the children's home they were babies. And little babies need love, warm food and music to sleep. Berenice felt tears in her eyes. You sang to my children? I did. A song my mother used to sing to me before she went away. Can you sing it for me? Isabella began to hum a soft melody, a simple lullaby but full of tenderness. Berenice listened in silence, imagining that childish voice consoling her babies when they needed it most. Thank you, she said when Isabella finished. Thank you for taking care of my children when I couldn't. You don't need to thank me. They're very beautiful babies, and now they have their real mommy to take care of them. Isabella, said Berenice impulsively, would you like to continue seeing the babies sometimes, to know how they're doing? Isabella's eyes lit up. Can I really? If Miss Sandra allows it, yes. Sandra intervened carefully. It would be possible to organize supervised visits if everyone agrees. I agree, said Berenice firmly. This girl saved my children. It's the least I can do. That night on the way back to Riverside, Berenice was quiet and thoughtful. What are you thinking about? Asked Ottavio. That girl, Isabella. She's 4 years old, the same age our children will be, and she has nobody. What do you mean? She saved our family, Ottavio. Our 3 children are alive and healthy because an abandoned child decided to take care of them. How are we going to repay that? What are you suggesting? Berenice remained silent for a long moment. I don't know yet, but I feel that our family owes something to Isabella, something very important. It was the beginning of a reflection that would change not only Isabella's destiny, but also the structure of the Mason family in ways none of them could yet imagine. 3 weeks had passed since the reunion, and a new routine was being established. Isabella could visit the babies twice a week at the municipal hospital, always accompanied by Sandra or Ms. Connie. These visits became the only moments when the girl showed true joy. "Look how they've grown," she would say every time she arrived at the nursery, running to see the triplets. "The middle one is chubbier, and the smallest one can already hold my hand." The hospital nurses had gotten used to Isabella's presence and were impressed by her ability to calm the babies when they were restless. "It's a gift," commented Nurse Carmen to Sandra. "I've never seen a child with such maternal instinct. When she sings to them, they get quiet right away." But while Isabella found comfort in these visits, a new concern was arising. Ottavio and Berenice were making preparations to take the triplets home as soon as they were discharged, and this meant Isabella's visits would become much more difficult to arrange. "Miss Sandra," asked Isabella one of those afternoons, "when the babies leave the hospital, can I still see them?" Sandra hesitated. The situation was getting complicated because Isabella had developed an attachment that went far beyond normal. "We'll see what's possible, Isabella. But they're going to miss me. I know they will." That same day in Riverside, Berenice was talking to Ottavio about her growing concerns. "I can't stop thinking about that girl," she said while organizing the baby's layette. "Isabella saved our children, and now we're just going to take them away, and she's going to be alone at the shelter." "Berenice, she won't be alone. There are other children at the shelter. There are people taking care of her. Ottavio, did you see how she looks at our babies? How they react when she's around? There's a real bond there. What do you want us to do? We can't adopt a child just because she took care of our children. Why not?" The question caught Ottavio off guard. "What do you mean, why not? Why can't we consider giving Isabella a family? She needs parents. We have the means to take care of her, and she's already part of our children's story." "Berenice, adoption is a very serious decision. It's not something you do out of gratitude." "It wouldn't be just out of gratitude," she insisted. "It would be out of love, because when I look at her, I see a girl who deserves to have a family. And when I see our babies with her, I see that she's already part of our family." Ottavio remained silent, processing his wife's words. He had also felt something special about the way Isabella cared for the triplets, but the idea of adoption seemed like too big a step. What if she doesn't want to? What if it's traumatic for her to leave the environment she already knows? What if it's the chance she's always hoped for to have a real family? The conversation was interrupted by an urgent phone call. Sheriff David Thompson was on the other end of the line, with news about the baby trafficking scheme investigation. "Mr. Ottavio," he said, "we need you to come to the station. We got enough evidence to arrest Dorothy Peterson and her accomplices." "Finally!" exclaimed Ottavio. "And Carol, is she okay?" "Carol is cooperating with the investigations and will testify, but we discovered something you need to know personally." An hour later, Ottavio was at the Millbrook police station hearing information that left him stunned. "The scheme was much bigger than we imagined," explained Sheriff Thompson. Dorothy not only sold babies, but also falsified birth and death certificates to cover up the crimes. What does that mean? It means your children are officially listed as dead in St. John's Hospital records. Dorothy falsified death certificates for them. Ottavio felt the ground move under his feet. My children are registered as dead. They are, and this created a complex legal situation. We'll need time to reverse all the false documentation. How long? A few weeks, maybe months. And in the meantime? In the meantime, technically your children don't exist legally. They can't be registered in your name until the whole situation is clarified. Ottavio returned home devastated. Besides almost losing his children, now he discovered that legally they had been declared dead. How would he explain this to Berenice? "What happened?" she asked as soon as she saw him enter. Ottavio told her everything, watching horror grow on his wife's face. "Our children are dead on paper," she whispered. "It's temporary. It'll be resolved." "What if it isn't? What if there's some legal problem that prevents us from registering them?" It was exactly the fear Ottavio was trying not to admit. What if the legal bureaucracy was more complicated than they imagined? The next day, Sandra received an unexpected call from Berenice. "Sandra, can I talk to you about Isabella?" "Of course, Mrs. Berenice. What would you like to know?" "What's the adoption process, hypothetically speaking?" Sandra felt her heart race. "Are you considering adopting Isabella?" "I'm considering giving a family to a girl who saved my family." "It's a complex process, Mrs. Berenice. It involves psychological evaluations, social visits, an adaptation period. But is it possible?" "Technically, yes, but there are complications. Isabella ran away from a children's home. We'd need to first regularize her situation. And how long would that take? Months, maybe more than a year." Berenice remained silent for a long moment. "Sandra, can I ask you a personal question? Do you believe Isabella would be happy in a family?" "I believe any child deserves to have a family that loves them." "But why this question?" "Because I'm discovering that my children might be months without being able to be officially registered because of the legal complications of the case. And I'm thinking maybe it's destiny giving us time to consider including Isabella in our family." "Mrs. Berenice, adoption isn't a decision you make on impulse." "It's not impulse, it's love. When I see Isabella with my babies, I see a sister taking care of her little brothers. I see a daughter who's already part of the family." That afternoon, Berenice went alone to the municipal shelter to visit Isabella. She found the girl in her usual place, by the window, drawing the triplets. "Hi, Isabella." "Hi, Mrs. Berenice. Did you come to take me to see the babies?" "Actually, I came to talk to you about something important." Isabella put down her crayons and paid full attention. "Have you ever thought about what it would be like to have a real family?" asked Berenice carefully. "I always think about it," replied Isabella honestly. "But families don't want girls who ran away from children's homes." "What if a family wanted you? What if a family loved you exactly as you are?" Isabella's eyes filled with hope and fear at the same time. "What family?" "Our family. Mine and Ottavio's." "And the babies?" "And the babies." Isabella remained silent for a long time, processing what she had just heard. "Do you want me to be part of your family?" "We want you to be our daughter, Isabella. For real." Tears began streaming down the girl's face. "And I could take care of my little brothers every day, and sing to them to sleep? Always." Isabella threw herself into Berenice's arms, crying with joy. I want so much to be part of your family." But what neither of them knew was that a devastating discovery was about to complicate all these plans in an unexpected way. Isabella's joy lasted exactly 3 days. That's when Sandra arrived at the shelter, with a grave expression that the girl had learned to recognize as a sign of bad news. "Isabella, we need to talk," she said, leading the girl to the private room where they usually had important conversations. "Is it about my new family?" asked Isabella excitedly. When can I go live with Mrs. Berenice and Mr. Ottavio? Sandra took a deep breath. The news she had received that morning would complicate everything. Isabella, do you remember talking about St. Michael's Children's Home, where you ran away from? I remember. Why? Because we did an investigation about you to arrange your adoption, and we discovered something important. The smile disappeared from Isabella's face. What did you discover? You're not an orphan, Isabella. You have family. The girl's eyes widened. What do you mean I have family? Your maternal grandmother, Sebastiana, has been looking for you for months. She never knew you had been taken to the children's home. Isabella remained silent for a long moment, processing this information. My grandma is alive. She is. And she wants very much to see you. But what about Mrs. Berenice? She said I was going to be her daughter. Sandra felt her heart tighten. Isabella, if you have biological family, they have legal priority over you. Mrs. Berenice can't adopt you if your grandmother wants custody back. Tears began streaming down Isabella's face. But I want to stay with the babies. They need me. I promised I would take care of them. I understand your pain, but laws exist to protect family ties. What if I don't want to go? What if I want to stay here? It's not a choice you can make alone. You're only 4 years old. That afternoon, Sandra had one of the most difficult conversations of her career when she called Berenice to give her the news. What do you mean she has family? Asked Berenice, clearly shaken. We discovered that her grandmother, Sebastiana Smith, 73 years old, has been looking for Isabella for months. She lives in a small town in rural Kentucky and only found out about her granddaughter's disappearance when she returned from a trip to care for a sick sister. And she can just take Isabella away? Legally, yes. The natural custody of a child belongs to the biological family, especially when there's a close relative willing and able to care for them. But Isabella doesn't want to go. She wants to stay with us. Mrs. Berenice, I understand your frustration, but Sandra, this girl saved my children. She's part of our family now. Unfortunately, that doesn't have legal value. Berenice hung up the phone and immediately told Ottavio everything, who was as shaken as she was. It's not fair, he said. Isabella got attached to our children. We got attached to her, and now a grandmother we don't even know is going to take her away. Ottavio, we have to do something. What can we do? Fight in court against a 73-year-old grandmother? 2 days later, Sebastiana Smith arrived in Millbrook. She was a small, frail lady with completely white hair and tired but determined eyes. She wore simple clothes and carried an old leather purse. "Where is my little granddaughter?" were her first words upon entering the municipal shelter. Sandra led her to Isabella, who was hiding in her room, refusing to come out since she learned of her grandmother's arrival. "Isabella," called Sebastiana softly through the door. "It's me, Grandma Sebastiana. Do you remember me?" Silence. "I know you're scared, my little granddaughter, but Grandma is here now. I came to take you home." "I don't want to go," screamed Isabella from inside the room. "I want to stay with my babies." Sebastiana looked at Sandra, confused. "What babies?" Sandra quickly explained the whole situation, how Isabella had found and cared for the triplets, how she had gotten attached to them, and how the Mason family had offered to adopt her. "My God," whispered Sebastiana. "My little granddaughter saved 3 babies?" "She did, and developed a very strong bond with them and with the family." Sebastiana sat heavily in a chair. "I didn't know about any of this. I only found out Isabella had disappeared when I returned from caring for my sick sister in Louisville." "How did she end up at St. Michael's Children's Home?" "Her mother, my daughter Carmen, left when Isabella was 3 years old. She became very ill and could no longer take care of the girl. I asked a neighbor to watch her while I traveled to care for my sister, but when I returned, the neighbor said social workers had taken Isabella to a children's home. I spent months looking for her, and now," Sebastiana sighed deeply, "now I don't know what to do. I want my little granddaughter back, but from what you're telling me, she's created new bonds here. Mrs. Sebastiana, may I suggest you meet the Mason family? Maybe we can find a solution that's good for everyone." The next day, a meeting was arranged at the municipal hospital. Sebastiana, Sandra, Ottavio, Berenice and Isabella gathered in the nursery, where the triplets were about to be discharged. "So you're the family that wants to adopt my granddaughter," said Sebastiana, observing Ottavio and Berenice. "Mrs. Sebastiana," said Berenice respectfully, "we know you have legal rights over Isabella, but she's become very important to our family, and our family has become important to her," added Ottavio. Sebastiana watched Isabella interacting with the babies. The girl hummed softly to them, and it was evident there was a real bond there. "Isabella," she said gently, "come here, my little granddaughter." Isabella approached hesitantly. "Do you remember Grandma?" "I remember a little. You used to smell like cornbread." Sebastiana smiled with tears in her eyes. "I still make cornbread every Sunday." "But Grandma, I can't leave. My little brothers need me." "They're not your real little brothers, Isabella." "Yes, they are. I saved them, took care of them, sang to them to sleep. They're my little brothers from the heart." Sebastiana looked at Berenice and Ottavio. "Do you really want to adopt her?" "With all our hearts," replied Berenice. "And can you give her everything she needs? Education, healthcare, love." "Everything," guaranteed Ottavio. Sebastiana remained silent for a long moment, observing the scene before her. She could see genuine love in Berenice's eyes when she looked at Isabella, and the way Ottavio treated the girl with paternal affection. "I'm an old lady," she said finally. "I'm 73 years old, have health problems, a small pension. I can give Isabella love, but I can't give her the opportunities you can." "Mrs. Sebastiana," said Berenice carefully, "are you suggesting—" "I'm suggesting that maybe the best thing for Isabella is to stay with you, but with one condition." "What condition?" "I want to continue being part of her life. I want to be able to visit her. I want her to know she has a grandma who loves her." Berenice and Ottavio looked at each other. It was more than they had hoped for. "Of course," said Berenice, "you'll always be welcome in our home." "And there's one more thing," said Sebastiana, looking directly at Isabella. "If you ever want to come live with Grandma, you can come. The door to my house will always be open for you." Isabella ran to hug Sebastiana. "Thank you, Grandma. I love you. And I love you too, my little granddaughter." It seemed like everything was finally being resolved, but that same afternoon, an unexpected call would change everything again. On the other end of the line, a voice they didn't expect to hear would bring news that would shake the entire family. The call came when Ottavio was organizing the final details to take the triplets home the next day. On the other end of the line, a nervous female voice identified herself as a lawyer. "Mr. Ottavio Mason? My name is Dr. Patricia Moore. I represent the couple Jefferson and Maristella Fitzgerald. I don't know these people. What is this about?" "Mr. Ottavio, my clients legally adopted 3 baby triplets 2 weeks ago through a process we now discovered was involved in the criminal scheme investigated by the police." Ottavio's blood ran cold. "What are you trying to say?" "The babies my clients adopted are the same ones found in Millbrook, your biological children." "That's impossible. My children are here at the hospital under my custody." "Mr. Ottavio, I need to inform you that my clients obtained a court order to maintain custody of the children until the entire legal situation is clarified." Ottavio sat down heavily, feeling the world collapse once more. "Counselor, those are my children, my biological children. I understand your situation, but legally, at the time of adoption, the babies were listed as orphans with no known family. My clients acted in good faith, paid all legal fees, and developed emotional bonds with the children." "Emotional bonds? I'm their father." "Mr. Ottavio, I suggest you find a lawyer. This situation will have to be resolved in court." When Ottavio hung up the phone, he was trembling. How would he explain to Berenice that in addition to all the problems they had already faced, now there was another family claiming custody of their children? At the municipal shelter, Isabella was living one of the happiest days of her life. She had spent the afternoon organizing her few belongings in a small bag Sandra had given her, preparing to finally leave the shelter and go live with her new family. "Tomorrow, I'll be in the new house with my babies," she told the other children. "I'm going to sing to them to sleep every day." Miss Connie watched Isabella's excitement with joy, but also with concern. She had received a call from Sandra asking not to tell the girl anything about possible complications until everything was clarified. That night, Berenice arrived at the hospital to talk to Ottavio and found her husband crying in the nursery next to the triplets. "What happened?" she asked, alarmed. Ottavio told her about the lawyer's call, watching horror grow on Berenice's face. "Another family adopted our children," she whispered. "How is that possible?" "Because of the false documents Dorothy created. Officially, our children were orphans, so they were put up for adoption. And now we have to fight in court to prove we're the biological parents." "But we are. We have tests. We have medical records." "I know that, you know that, but the couple who adopted them also has legal rights now." Berenice sat in a chair, trying to process the situation. "Ottavio, what about Isabella? How are we going to tell her that maybe we can't take her home tomorrow?" "I don't know. How do you explain to a 4-year-old child that the family she was hoping for might not exist anymore?" The next day, instead of the happy day they had planned, Ottavio and Berenice found themselves in the office of a family law specialist, Dr. Richard Santos. "The situation is complex," the lawyer explained after analyzing all the documents. "You are unquestionably the biological parents of the babies, but the Fitzgerald couple has a legal adoption, even if based on falsified documents." "And what does that mean in practice?" asked Berenice. "It means we'll have to file a lawsuit to annul the adoption and restore custody of the babies to you, but that could take months." "Months!" exclaimed Ottavio. "And meanwhile my children stay with strangers." "Meanwhile, the court will determine a visitation regime and monitoring of the situation." "And Isabella, the girl who saved the babies and we were going to adopt?" Dr. Richard frowned. "That's another complication. If you don't have custody of the babies, it's difficult to justify Isabella's adoption as part of the family unit." That same day in Louisville, Jefferson and Maristella Fitzgerald were meeting with their lawyer, discussing the situation. Jefferson, 42 years old, was a civil engineer, and Maristella, also 42, was a teacher. They had tried to have children for years before deciding on adoption. "I don't understand how this happened," said Maristella, rocking one of the babies. "We did everything right, followed all legal procedures." "You were victims of a criminal scheme," explained Dr. Patricia. "But that doesn't automatically invalidate the feelings you developed for the children." "Feelings?" said Jefferson. "These babies are our children now. We've cared for them for 2 weeks, woken up at night to give bottles, changed diapers, given love." "I understand, but the biological parents also have rights." "And don't we have rights?" asked Maristella, tears beginning to flow. "Don't we have the right to love the children we promised to care for?" While 2 families fought over the triplets, Isabella was living the worst day of her life since she had been separated from the babies for the first time. "I don't understand," she told Sandra, crying. "Why can't I go to the new house today? Mrs. Berenice promised." "Isabella, some complications arose. We're going to need to wait a little longer." "But have my babies already left the hospital? Are they alone?" Sandra hesitated. How to explain to a 4-year-old child that the babies were with another family, that there was a legal battle happening, and that everything she had dreamed of might not come true? "The babies are being cared for, Isabella." "By whom? By Mrs. Berenice? By people who know how to take care of babies?" The evasive answer made Isabella suspicious. "Miss Sandra, did something bad happen to my babies?" "No, they're fine," Then why can't I see them? Why can't I go to the new house? At that moment, Berenice arrived at the shelter. She had spent the entire morning trying to find courage to talk to Isabella about the situation. "Isabella," she said, crouching down to the girl's height, "we need to talk about something difficult. Is it about the babies? Are they okay?" "They're okay, but some problems arose that we need to solve." "What problems?" Berenice took a deep breath. "Remember when I told you that bad people had stolen the babies from their parents?" "I remember." "Well, these bad people also made false documents saying the babies had no parents. And because of these documents, another family adopted them." Isabella remained silent for a long moment, trying to understand. "Another family adopted my babies." "Adopted them, but without knowing they already had parents. It was a mistake. And now? Now we're fighting in court to prove the babies are our children and should come back to us. What if you can't?" Berenice felt her heart break. "We don't know, Isabella. We don't know. And me? If you don't get the babies, I can't be part of your family. We still don't know how everything will be resolved." That night, Isabella cried herself to sleep, hugging the drawing of the triplets she had made on the first day at the shelter. All her dreams of having a family, of caring for the babies she had saved, were crumbling again. And in 2 different houses, 4 adults also cried for the same reason. 3 innocent babies who had become the center of a legal battle that could last months, leaving everyone involved in suffering. 2 months had passed since the beginning of the judicial battle, and the situation had become torture for everyone involved. Isabella was back to the shelter routine, but now with frequent crying episodes and recurring nightmares. She had lost weight and refused to participate in activities with the other children. "She's regressing," explained child psychologist Dr. Amanda Silva to Sandra. "The trauma of repeated separation is causing serious emotional damage. Isn't there anything we can do? What she needs is stability, and this legal battle is taking that away from her." That morning, an important hearing was taking place at the Riverside County Courthouse. Otavio and Berenice were on one side, with their lawyer, Dr. Richard Santos. On the other side, Jefferson and Maristella Fitzgerald, accompanied by Dr. Patricia Moore. "Your Honor," said Dr. Richard, "my clients are the unquestionable biological parents of the triplets. We have DNA tests, medical records from the birth, and all necessary evidence." "We don't question biological paternity," responded Dr. Patricia. "But my clients adopted these children in good faith through legal process and developed deep emotional bonds with them." Judge Fernando Adams observed the documents carefully. "The situation is unprecedented in my experience. We have biological parents who were victims of a crime and adoptive parents who were also deceived by the same criminal scheme." "Your Honor," said Otavio, asking to speak, "they're my children. They were born from my wife. How can they stay with another family?" "Mr. Otavio," replied Jefferson, "I understand your pain, but we've cared for these babies for 2 months. They know our voices, calm down in our arms, are part of our family." "You had 2 months," said Berenice, her voice choked. "I carried them for 9 months inside me." The tension in the room was palpable. The judge raised his hand, asking for silence. "I will order a technical evaluation to assess the children's well-being in both environments. Meanwhile, the supervised visitation regime continues for both families." While the hearing was taking place, Isabella was living one of her worst days at the shelter. She had woken up crying from a nightmare where the babies called for her help and couldn't eat breakfast. "Isabella," said Ms. Connie gently, "you need to eat something. I'm not hungry, but you didn't eat anything yesterday either. I don't want to eat. I want my babies. You know they're being well cared for." "Not by me," exploded Isabella. "They need me. I know how they like things. I know what song each one likes to hear." That afternoon, Sandra arrived at the shelter with an unexpected proposal. "Isabella, how would you like to see the babies?" The girl's eyes lit up for the first time in weeks. Can I really? The judge authorized a supervised visit. You, me, Mrs. Berenice, and Mr. Ottavio can see the babies at the house where they're living now. At the house of the people who adopted them? That's right. But you need to understand it's just a visit. An hour later, Isabella was in the back seat of Sandra's car, heading toward Louisville. Berenice followed in the car behind with Ottavio, everyone anxious and nervous. The Fitzgerald house was large and well-maintained, in a quiet residential neighborhood. When they arrived, Maristella received them at the door, visibly tense. "Please, come in," she said politely, but it was evident that the situation was uncomfortable for everyone. When Isabella saw the triplets in the improvised nursery in the living room, she ran toward them. "My babies!" she exclaimed, but stopped abruptly when one of the babies started crying upon seeing her. "He doesn't recognize me," she whispered, confused and hurt. "They were very small when you took care of them," Jefferson explained gently. "Now they're bigger." Isabella approached slowly and began humming the lullaby she always sang to them. Gradually, the three babies calmed down and began looking at her with curiosity. "They remember the song," she said with joy. "Look how quiet they got." Maristella observed the scene with mixed feelings. It was impossible to deny there was something special about how the babies reacted to Isabella's voice. "Did you sing that to them when they were little?" she asked. "I did. And I told them little stories and caressed their foreheads when they cried." During the 2-hour visit, Isabella interacted with the babies naturally, demonstrating knowledge of small details about each one's preferences that impressed even Jefferson and Maristella. "How do you know he likes to be rocked to the left side?" asked Maristella, watching Isabella calm one of the triplets. "Because when I took care of him at the market, he only stopped crying when I rocked him like this," replied Isabella naturally. When it was time to leave, Isabella said goodbye to each baby individually, whispering promises that she would come back to see them. On the way back, she remained quiet for a long time before speaking. "Ms. Sandra, are the people who adopted my babies good? They seem to be good people, yes. Do they love the babies? I believe so. What if the babies are happier there?" The question caught Sandra off guard. "Why are you asking that?" "Because I saw they have beautiful cribs, toys, a room just for them, and the house is big and smells nice." "Isabella, are you worried about the baby's well-being?" "I'm always worried about them. I want them to be happy." That night, an unexpected call came to Dr. Richard Santos's office. It was Dr. Patricia, the Fitzgerald's lawyer. "Dr. Richard, my clients would like to propose an agreement." "What kind of agreement?" "They recognize they can't compete with the biological bond, but they've developed genuine love for the babies. They'd like to propose shared custody." "Shared custody? How would that work?" "The babies would officially stay with the biological parents, but my clients would have regular visitation rights and could participate in raising them." Dr. Richard was surprised. And why would they make this proposal? Because after today's visit, they realized that completely separating the children from all the bonds they've created could be harmful to them. And mainly, they were impressed with the girl who saved them. "Isabella?" "Exactly. My clients would like to include in the agreement proposal that Isabella also have regular visitation rights to the babies, regardless of where she lives." It was a proposal no one had considered, but that could be the solution to everyone's suffering. The next morning, Dr. Richard presented the proposal to Ottavio and Berenice, who were initially surprised. "They want to divide our children?" asked Berenice. "Not divide. They recognize you're the parents. But they want to continue being part of the babies' lives, and Isabella would have guaranteed by law the right to visit the babies regularly." Ottavio and Berenice looked at each other. The proposal solved all legal problems and still guaranteed that Isabella could maintain her bond with the children she had saved. "We'll accept," said Ottavio. "If this means we can have our children back and Isabella can continue being part of their lives, we'll accept." But there was still a bigger surprise waiting for all of them. The agreement proposal was being finalized when an unexpected discovery completely changed the course of the entire situation. Sandra received an urgent call from Sheriff David Thompson from the Millbrook police station. "Sandra, I need you to come here immediately. And bring Isabella." "What happened?" "We discovered something about St. Michael's Children's Home that changes everything about Isabella's situation." "What kind of discovery?" "I prefer to explain in person, but I can tell you that Isabella might not be who we thought she was." 2 hours later, Sandra was at the police station with Isabella, who held her hand nervously. "Miss Sandra, why are we here?" asked the girl. "Did I do something wrong?" "No, dear. The sheriff just wants to talk to us." Sheriff Thompson received them in his office with a serious but gentle expression. "Isabella," he said, crouching to the girl's height, "do you remember your life before St. Michael's Children's Home?" "I remember a little. I lived with my mom." "And do you remember your mother's name?" "Carmen. She was beautiful and sang to me." Sheriff Thompson exchanged a meaningful look with Sandra. "Isabella, your mother was called Carmen Smith, right?" "I think so." "Why?" "During our investigation of St. Michael's Children's Home, we discovered that the director, besides mistreating children, also falsified identity documents." Sandra frowned. "What does this have to do with Isabella?" "It has to do with it because Isabella's real last name isn't Smith, it's Santos." "What do you mean?" "Isabella, your mother, wasn't called Carmen Smith. She was called Carmen Santos." The girl was confused. "But what's the difference?" "The difference, my dear," said Sheriff Thompson gently, "is that Santos is also the Mason family's last name. Berenice, before marrying, was called Berenice Santos." The silence in the room was deafening. Sandra felt her legs go weak. "Sheriff, are you suggesting that—" "I'm saying that Isabella and Berenice Mason are cousins. Carmen Santos was Berenice's sister." Isabella looked at the adults, trying to understand what this information meant. "Mrs. Berenice is my cousin." "No, dear," said Sheriff Thompson. "Berenice is your aunt, and the babies you saved are your cousins." The revelation was like lightning. Isabella had saved her own cousins without knowing it. The family she so wanted to be part of was already her biological family. "But how is this possible?" asked Sandra. "Why did Berenice never mention having a sister?" "Because she didn't know her sister had a daughter. Carmen and Berenice had a falling out years ago and lost contact. Berenice didn't know she had a niece." That afternoon, Sandra called Berenice, asking her and Ottavio to come urgently to the police station. "Did something happen to Isabella?" asked Berenice, worried. "You need to come. There's something you need to know." When Ottavio and Berenice arrived at the police station, they found Isabella playing with some toys in the waiting room, supervised by a staff member. "Isabella!" exclaimed Berenice, running to hug the girl. "How are you?" "Aunt Berenice," said Isabella, using the title Sheriff Thompson had explained to her. Berenice stopped in the middle of the hug. "What did you say?" "Aunt Berenice." "The sheriff said you're really my aunt." Berenice looked at Sandra, completely confused. What is she talking about? Sheriff Thompson explained the entire discovery to the couple, observing emotions pass over Berenice's face. Surprise, shock, disbelief, and finally overwhelming joy. "Carmen had a daughter?" she whispered. "My sister had a daughter and I didn't even know?" "When was the last time you spoke?" asked Sheriff Thompson. "More than 5 years ago. We fought over something silly, pride on both sides. I tried looking for her a few times, but never managed to find her." "Berenice," said Ottavio softly, "this means Isabella really is our family." "It means the babies she saved are her own cousins," added Sandra. Berenice knelt in front of Isabella, holding her little hands. "Isabella, did you know your mommy and I were sisters?" "I didn't know. Mommy never talked about you." "And you never knew you had cousins?" "No. I always wanted to have little brothers, but didn't know I already had them. Tears began streaming down Berenice's face. "My dear, you saved your own cousins, as if you knew they were family." "Maybe I knew it in my heart," said Isabella with the innocent wisdom of children. "That's why I loved them so much the first time I saw them." That night, the news completely changed all legal negotiations. It was no longer about adoption out of gratitude, but about legitimate family reunification. "The situation becomes much simpler now," explained Dr. Richard to Ottavio and Berenice. "Isabella has legal right to stay with you as a close relative." "What about her grandmother?" "Sebastiana. She continues being grandmother, but you, as direct aunt and uncle, and having better conditions to care for her, have priority in custody." "And the Fitzgeralds?" "The visitation agreement still stands, if you want to maintain it." 2 days later, a family meeting took place at Ottavio and Berenice's house, who had finally received definitive custody of the triplets. Present were Isabella, Sebastiana, Jefferson, and Maristella Fitzgerald, and Sandra. "I can't believe everything happened like this," said Sebastiana, watching Isabella play with the babies in the living room. "My granddaughter saved her own cousins without knowing it." "It was destiny," said Maristella. "It had to be destiny." "And now?" asked Jefferson. "How are we going to handle the visits?" "You're welcome here whenever you want to see the babies," said Berenice. "You took care of them when I couldn't." "That makes you part of the family, too." "And Isabella?" asked Sebastiana. "Can I continue seeing my granddaughter?" "Grandma," said Isabella, getting up and running to hug Sebastiana. "Now I have a big family. I have an aunt, uncle, cousins, grandma, and even Uncle Jefferson and Aunt Maristella, who took care of the babies." "That's true," smiled Sebastiana. "You have a huge family." That night, after everyone left, Isabella was in the room they had prepared for her, trying to fall asleep. It was the first night she slept in the house that would officially be her home. Berenice entered the room to say good night. "Aunt Berenice," said Isabella, "can I ask you a question?" "Of course, dear. Why did my mother never tell me you existed?" Berenice sighed. "Sometimes adults do silly things, get proud, and end up losing important people. Your mother and I fought over something stupid and went years without talking. Did she know I was going to find you?" "I don't know, Isabella, but I'm sure that wherever she is, she's happy to know you have a family that loves you." "I miss her. And it's normal to miss her. She'll always be your mother. I'm your aunt who loves you very much and wants to take care of you." "And can I continue calling the babies my little brothers?" Berenice smiled. "You can. Because now they really are your little brothers from the heart." But Isabella's happiness still wasn't complete. There was one last surprise waiting for her, which would only be revealed the next day. The next morning brought a call that would change everything once more. Berenice was preparing breakfast when the phone rang. On the other end of the line, a hesitant female voice identified herself as a nurse from Louisville General Hospital. "Mrs. Berenice Mason?" "Yes, this is me. My name is Nurse Sonia. Ma'am, do you have a sister named Carmen Santos?" Berenice's heart stopped. "I have had." "Why?" "Mrs. Berenice, your sister has been hospitalized here for 3 years. She's waking up from a prolonged vegetative state." "What did you say?" whispered Berenice, leaning on the kitchen counter. "Carmen Santos suffered a car accident 3 years ago and has been in a coma. Only now is she showing signs of consciousness recovery. And she's asking for her daughter." Berenice began to tremble. She's alive? My sister is alive?" "Yes, ma'am, and it seems she's recovering well. Would you like to come visit her?" I'll come right now." When Berenice hung up the phone, Ottavio found her crying in the kitchen. "What happened? Is it about Isabella?" "Ottavio, Carmen is alive. My sister is alive." "What do you mean?" "She's been hospitalized for 3 years in a coma, and now she's awake. She's asking for Isabella." Isabella, who had come downstairs for breakfast, heard the conversation and approached timidly. "Aunt Berenice, did you mention my mum?" Berenice knelt in front of the girl, holding her little hands carefully. "Isabella, I have news that might be difficult to understand. Your mommy didn't go to heaven like you thought. She's in a hospital, sick, but alive." Isabella's eyes widened. "My mom is alive." "She is. She had an accident and was sleeping for a long time, but now she's awake. Can I see her?" "We're going to see her right now." The trip to Louisville was tense. Isabella remained quiet most of the time, alternating between anxiety and fear. What if her mother didn't recognize her? What if she was very different? At the hospital, Nurse Sonia led them to the ICU room where Carmen was hospitalized. "She's still weak," the nurse explained, "but she's conscious and talking. She just doesn't remember much from the years before the accident." When they entered the room, Isabella saw a thin woman in bed, with shorter hair than she remembered, but undoubtedly her mother. "Mommy," she whispered. Carmen turned her head, and upon seeing the girl began to cry. "Isabella, my daughter, you've grown so much." Isabella ran to the bed and was carefully embraced by Carmen, who was too emotional to speak. "Mommy, I thought you had gone away forever," sobbed Isabella. "Never, my daughter. I would never leave you. But where have you been all this time?" Berenice approached the bed. "Carmen, it's me, Berenice." Carmen looked at her sister with surprise and tears in her eyes. "Berenice? My sister?" "Yes, Carmen. Isabella is living with me." "How? Why?" Berenice briefly explained the entire story. How Isabella had escaped from the children's home, how she had saved the triplets, how they discovered they were family. "My daughter saved your babies?" asked Carmen, impressed. "She did, and now she's part of our family." Carmen held Isabella's hand. "My brave little daughter, how did you manage to take care of 3 babies?" "I learned at the children's home, Mommy, and they needed me." "And now, are you happy living with your aunt, Berenice?" Isabella looked at Berenice and then at her mother. "I am happy. But I missed you so much, and I missed you too, my daughter." During the following hours, doctors explained Carmen's situation to the family. She had suffered severe brain trauma in the accident, been in a coma for 3 years, and was now beginning to recover, but it would still take months for her complete rehabilitation. "The important thing," said neurologist Dr. Paul Henry, "is that there are no permanent cognitive sequelae. With physical therapy and time, she can recover completely." "And meanwhile," asked Berenice, "she'll need to stay hospitalized for a few more weeks, then will be transferred to rehabilitation." That night, at the hotel where they were staying, Isabella asked the question Berenice had been dreading. "Aunt Berenice, when my mom gets better, will I have to go live with her?" Berenice chose her words carefully. "Isabella, your mother loves you very much. When she's well, you'll decide together what's best. But I don't want to leave you and my little brothers. And we don't want you to go away. But your mother is your most important family. What if we could all stay together? My mom, you, me, and the babies." It was an innocent question, but it brought up a possibility that Berenice hadn't considered. In the following days, Berenice spent a lot of time talking with Carmen, rebuilding the sisterly relationship they had lost due to pride and misunderstandings. "Berenice," said Carmen in one of these conversations, "thank you for taking care of Isabella. I know it must have been difficult." "It wasn't difficult. She brought joy to our house, and she saved my children. She told me everything about the babies. I want to meet them." "You will meet them. When you're better, I want you to come live near us." "Berenice, you don't need to—" "Yes, I do. We're sisters, Carmen. We lost years fighting over something silly. I won't lose any more time." "And Isabella? She seems so attached to you and the children." "She needs both of us, Carmen. You're her mother. I'm the aunt who also loves her. Why should she have to choose?" The following week, a family meeting was organized in the hospital room. Present were Carmen, Berenice, Ottavio, Isabella, Sebastiana, and even Jefferson and Maristella, who had become part of the extended family. "Isabella," said Carmen, I want to talk to you about our future. The girl approached the bed, anxious. When I leave the hospital, I'll need more time to get completely well, and during that time, I want you to continue living with Aunt Berenice. And then? Then if you want, we can live close to Aunt Berenice. That way you can take care of your little brothers every day, and I can take care of you. Isabella's eyes filled with tears of joy. Can I really? I won't have to choose between you and my new family? You'll never have to choose, my daughter. Family isn't about choosing. It's about loving. And Grandma Sebastiana? Sebastiana approached. Grandma will also live nearby, my granddaughter. That way you have your mother, your aunt, your uncle, your cousins, and your grandma always close by. That night, Isabella fell asleep in Carmen's arms for the first time in over a year, while Berenice hummed a lullaby to the triplets they had brought to meet Isabella's biological mother. It was a family image that no one would have imagined months ago, but that now seemed the natural destiny of all the events. A girl had saved 3 babies without knowing they were her cousins, reuniting a family that was scattered by pain and misunderstandings. But there was still one last surprise waiting for all of them. 3 weeks later, when Carmen finally was discharged from the hospital to continue treatment at home, an unexpected discovery was about to complete the circle of revelations that had changed everyone's lives. Isabella was helping Berenice arrange a room for her mother in the Mason family house when she found, in a box of Carmen's belongings that had been recovered from the accident, a series of old letters yellowed by time. Aunt Berenice, what are these letters? She asked, showing the envelopes. Berenice took the letters and immediately recognized her own handwriting. These are letters I wrote to your mother years ago, Isabella. When we were young. Can I read them? I think we should ask your mother first. That afternoon, when Carmen came back from her physical therapy session, Berenice showed her the letters. Carmen, Isabella found these old letters. Did you keep them all? Carmen took the envelopes carefully, her eyes filling with tears. I kept everyone. Even after we fought, I couldn't throw them away. Mommy, said Isabella curiously, did you write letters to each other? We did. When we were young, I lived in another city and your aunt stayed here. We wrote to each other every week. Berenice picked up one of the letters and opened it carefully. Can I read a part, Carmen? You can. My dear sister, read Berenice. Today I dreamed that we had children who played together, like we played when we were little. I dreamed that our children loved each other like siblings, and that our family would always be united. I hope that someday this dream will come true. Silence filled the room. Carmen began to cry softly. I also dreamed about that, she said. I dreamed our children would grow up together. And they did, said Berenice. Differently than we imagined, but they did. Isabella saved my nephews without even knowing they were family, murmured Carmen, as if destiny wanted to fulfill our old dream. That night during dinner, Ottavio made an announcement that surprised everyone. I have a proposal to make to the whole family, he said. How about we build a bigger house, a house where everyone can live together? A bigger house? Asked Isabella. A house with rooms for everyone, a big yard where you can play, and enough space for our family to grow. Is our family going to grow? Asked Carmen. Berenice smiled. Well, 3 babies at once already made our family grow quite a bit. But who knows what the future holds? And would Grandma Sebastiana also live in the big house? Asked Isabella. Of course, said Ottavio. Everyone would have their own space, but we'd always be together. Sebastiana, who was having dinner with them, was moved. Do you really want me around? Grandma, said Isabella, family stays together. Aunt Berenice taught me that. 2 weeks later, plans for the new house were being finalized. It would be built on a large lot on the outskirts of town, with individual rooms for everyone, large common areas, and even a special space that Isabella had requested, a room just for the babies to play in when they grew up. I want them to have a place just for them to play, she explained to the architect, with toys, books, and a big window to watch the birds. During this planning and construction period, the family's routine had been established harmoniously. Carmen continued her recovery, each day stronger and more present in Isabella's life. Berenice took care of the triplets with Isabella's constant help, who had become an exemplary big sister. But it was on a Sunday afternoon, during a visit from Jefferson and Maristella, that the last piece of the puzzle fell into place. "You know," said Maristella, watching Isabella play with the triplets in the yard, "there's something that always intrigued me." "What?" asked Berenice. "The instinct Isabella had to take care of the babies. It was as if she knew exactly what to do." "She said she learned at the children's home," commented Ottavio. "Yes, but it was more than technical knowledge. It was as if she felt a special connection with them." Carmen, who was listening to the conversation, became thoughtful. "You know, when Isabella was a baby, I always told her that someday she would have little brothers to take care of." "What do you mean?" asked Berenice. "I dreamed of having more children. I always told Isabella she would be a wonderful big sister. I even sang to her about how nice it would be to have little brothers." "The song!" exclaimed Isabella suddenly, running from the area where she was playing. "Mommy, you sang that song about taking care of little brothers." "I did, my daughter. And that was the song I sang to the babies when I found them." Everyone fell silent, understanding the depth of that moment. Isabella had taken care of the triplets, singing the same song her mother sang to her about taking care of little brothers. The circle was complete. "It seems you were destined to find each other," said Jefferson, moved. "Not just to find each other," corrected Sebastiana, "to save each other." That night, after everyone went home, the nuclear family, Ottavio, Berenice, Carmen, Sebastiana, and Isabella, gathered in the living room, with the triplets sleeping in each adult's arms. "Do you realize," said Berenice softly, "that each one of us was saved somehow?" "How so?" asked Carmen. "Isabella saved us when she brought the babies back. The babies saved Isabella when they gave her a purpose. You recovered when you knew Isabella was okay. I reconciled with my sister. Ottavio found a bigger family than he dreamed of. And I," said Sebastiana, "found an entire family when I thought I only had a granddaughter." Isabella, who was sleepy in Carmen's arms, murmured softly, "And the babies found a sister who will always take care of them." "Always," everyone promised in chorus. 3 months later, when they moved to the new house, Isabella insisted on having a special ceremony in the yard. "I want to give thanks," she said, standing in the middle of all the adults who had become her family. "Thank you for finding my little brothers, for finding you, and for learning that family isn't just who's born together, but who chooses to stay together." It was profound wisdom for a girl of only 5 years old, but it perfectly summarized the extraordinary journey that had brought them there. When night fell on that first day in the new house, Isabella made her last rounds, as she always did before sleeping, checking that each of the triplets was okay in their cribs. "Good night, my little brothers," she whispered. "Big sister is here, always will be." And for the first time since she had found them that cold morning at the downtown market, Isabella slept with absolute certainty that her family was complete, safe, and united forever. 1 year later, on a sunny spring morning, Isabella was in the yard of the new house teaching the triplets, now almost 2 years old, to take their first steps. The boys had grown healthy and smart, and Isabella continued being the big sister everyone always knew she would be. "Come on, Michael," she called, extending her arms to the most courageous of the three. "Come to sister." Michael took a few unsteady steps before falling down on the grass, laughing. His brothers, Peter and John, watched from afar, still more cautious about first steps. "Take it easy, you can do it," encouraged Isabella. "When I found you, you were tiny little babies. Now look how you've grown." Berenice watched the scene from the porch, still getting emotional seeing how Isabella had developed over the past year. The girl was attending the local school, where she was one of the teacher's favorite students. She had overcome past traumas with the help of therapy and mainly with the family's constant love. "She was born to be a big sister," commented Carmen, who had joined Berenice on the porch. Her recovery had been complete, and now she worked part-time at a local daycare, using her experience to help other children. "And we were born to be a big, united family," replied Berenice, watching Sebastiana, who was in the kitchen preparing Sunday lunch. At that moment, Ottavio arrived from work early, as had become his Sunday habit. In his arms he carried a special surprise. "Isabella!" he called. "There's someone here who wants to see you!" Isabella ran toward her uncle, leaving the triplets under the careful watch of Berenice and Carmen. In Ottavio's arms was a 2-month-old golden retriever puppy. "Is he for me?" she asked, barely containing her emotion. "He is. We thought our family still needed one more member." Isabella took the puppy in her arms, who immediately began licking her face. "What's his name?" "That's for you to decide." "Guardian," she said without hesitation, "because he's going to help take care of the boys, like I do." The afternoon passed peacefully, with the entire family gathered in the yard. Guardian had already adapted perfectly, playing gently with the triplets and following Isabella everywhere. It was when the sun began to set that Sandra arrived for a surprise visit. She came monthly to check how Isabella was adapting, but these visits had become more social than professional. "How is our brave girl?" she asked, hugging Isabella. "I'm very well, Aunt Sandra. Do you want to see how my little brothers can walk now?" "I do." While Isabella proudly showed the triplets' progress, Sandra talked with the family's adults. "You know that next month marks exactly 1 year since we officially closed the case," she commented. "1 year since our family was complete," said Sebastiana, moved. "And there's more news," continued Sandra. "The judge decided that Isabella's story will be used as an example in training for social workers." "How so?" asked Carmen. "The way a 4-year-old child had the instinct to protect and care for abandoned babies, and how this revealed a family network that no one knew about, will be studied as an exceptional case." "Isabella is going to be famous," joked Ottavio. "She's already famous here in town," said Berenice. "Every time we go out, someone stops to greet the girl who saved the triplets." That night during dinner, one last surprise was reserved for Isabella. "Isabella," said Berenice solemnly, "we have something important to give you." "What is it?" Ottavio got up and went to get a large envelope from the living room. When he returned, he ceremoniously handed it to Isabella. "Open it," asked Carmen, smiling. Inside the envelope was an official document that Isabella couldn't read completely yet, but she recognized the word adoption. "What is this?" she asked. "It's the document that officially says you're our daughter," explained Berenice. "Your mother agreed that Uncle Ottavio and I should also be your legal parents. This means you have 2 mothers who love you," said Carmen. "Me, who brought you into this world, and Aunt Berenice, who raised you when I couldn't, and a father who loves you like a daughter," added Ottavio. "And a grandma who loves you as her most precious granddaughter," completed Sebastiana. Isabella remained silent for a moment, processing the meaning of it all. Then, with the wisdom that had always characterized her, she said, "So now I'm officially the boy's big sister?" "Officially and forever," everyone confirmed in chorus. Later, when everyone had gone to bed, Isabella made her usual nightly rounds through the triplets' rooms. She found Michael awake in his crib, playing silently with a toy. "Hi, Michael," she whispered. "Can't sleep." The boy babbled something incomprehensible, extending his little arms to his sister. Isabella carefully picked him up and sat in the rocking chair in the boy's room. She began humming the song her mother had taught her, the same one she had sung to them that cold morning at the downtown market. "You know, Michael," she said quietly, "you and your brothers gave me a family. When I found you in that basket, I didn't know you were my cousins. I didn't know I would discover I had an aunt, An uncle, a new grandma? Michael listened attentively, as if he understood every word. But deep in my heart, I think I always knew you were special. That's why I took such good care of you. That's why I didn't let anyone separate us. Peter and John, who had woken up with the conversation, stood up in their cribs, listening to their sister. "Come here, my little brothers," said Isabella, sitting on the floor between the three cribs. "I'm going to tell you the story of how we found each other." And there, in the middle of the room, lit only by the soft light of the lamp, Isabella told the triplets the story that had become legend in the family, how a 4-year-old girl had found 3 abandoned babies on a cold morning, and how that encounter had brought an entire family together. "And do you know what's the most important part of the story?" she concluded. The 3 boys looked at her with total attention. "The most important part is that family isn't just who's born together. Family is who chooses to stay together, who takes care of each other, who loves each other, and we're going to be family forever." Michael babbled something that sounded suspiciously like sis, sis, his attempt to say sister. Peter and John clapped their little hands, as they always did when they were happy. "That's right," laughed Isabella. "I'm your sis, sis. The big sister who will always take care of you." When she finally managed to get all 3 to sleep again, Isabella returned to her own room. On the dresser, there were 2 framed photos, one of her with the triplets the day she found them, taken at the municipal hospital, and another of the entire family in the new house. She looked at the photos for a moment, remembering everything that had happened. The cold morning when she had woken up not knowing her life would change completely. The fear she felt at the police station, the painful longing at the shelter, the joy of discovering she had a family, the reunion with her mother, the new house where everyone fit. "Thank you," she whispered to no one in particular, or perhaps to destiny that had conspired to bring her family together. Guardian, who had made his bed at the foot of Isabella's bed, raised his head as if he knew she was saying something important. "Thank you for letting me find my little brothers," she continued. "Thank you for giving me the family I always wanted." From the hallway, Carmen and Berenice watched the scene through the half-open door, their eyes full of tears of happiness. "Our girl has grown so much," whispered Carmen. "And she continues growing surrounded by love," replied Berenice. "As it always should have been." When Isabella finally lay down, Guardian climbed onto the bed and curled up beside her. Through the window she could see the stars shining over her house, over her family, over her complete and happy life. At 6 years old, Isabella Santos Mason, now officially bearing the surnames of the 2 families that loved her, had lived more adventures than many adults. She had saved lives, brought families together, overcome traumas, and most importantly, she had learned that true love always finds a way to unite the right people. And as she fell asleep in her warm bed, safe in her house full of love, Isabella smiled, thinking about how good it would be to wake up the next morning for another day, taking care of her little brothers, surrounded by the family that destiny had conspired to give her. The girl who had once been abandoned on the streets, who had run away from a children's home out of love for younger children, who had saved 3 babies on a cold morning, now slept peacefully, knowing she had found her place in the world, being the big sister of the most loving family anyone could wish for. And in her dreams, she flew high like the birds she had always admired. But now she didn't fly to escape from something. She flew to contemplate, from above, the house where her family slept in peace, knowing that in the morning they would all be together again, for another day of love, laughter, and mutual care. Isabella's story had begun with tears and abandonment, but ended with the certainty that sometimes life's greatest blessings come disguised as challenges, and that true love always finds a way to transform suffering into joy, loneliness into family, and fear into hope. If you enjoyed this wonderful story, please comment. Your opinion is very important. And if you love beautiful stories, subscribe to my channel. I promise to make your day better with my videos.